Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the second of our technical evenings on the presentations for 2021 calendar. This afternoon's presentation is by Damon Holmes, Senior National Project Manager for Tarmac. Damon has worked for Tarmac for almost 16 years, starting in building products as a planner. Damon's current role is leading several customer relationships on major projects such as HS2, where he acts as a project manager. Damon leads the mobilisation phase, which includes the installation of new infrastructure, recruitment and delivery team for the contract execution. HS2 is a high-speed nail network which is planned for the UK. The first phase is currently under construction. In this presentation, you will hear about the scale of the construction, demands of the project, civil contractors involved, their supply chain, and types of materials required to deliver the UK's largest construction project. So, Damon, could I ask you please to start the presentation?
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the presentation. Thanks to Malcolm, who's on the call, for volunteering me a few months ago. I think, Malcolm, you picked up something that I did at Digital Hillhead and thought it would be a good idea to give an overview of HS2, the project, what it's all about, the materials that are involved, the scale of it, and just give an overview of how Tarmac are involved, how we're collaborating with the supply chain, and also how we're interacting and engaging with the customers on the project. There's an agenda on the screen there. I'll start introducing myself, my background at Tarmac over the last 16 years and prior to that, and then I'll run through the basics of HS2, where it's come from, why it's being built, the different stages. The main works is what I'll focus on mostly because that's what's happening at the moment, and I'll take you through some of the procurement aspects, some of the key risks and challenges. I'll talk a little bit about equality, diversity and inclusion and skills education and employment and the legacy that HS2 is going to leave the UK, and then I'll touch on the future phases. So we'll walk into phase 2A and phase 2B, and I think at the end there'll be around 10 or 15 minutes or so for questions and answers. So think about those as we walk through the slide deck. A little bit about myself. I am half Scottish, so I'm not alien to north of the border. My mum originally lived in Glasgow, in Rockazy. She lived in Inverness, and she's been in Glenrothes as well. I've spent quite a lot of time in Scotland. I worked out of our Bells Hill office for around about 6 months, 8 to 9 years ago. And I've also worked along the sort of central belt, so it's relatively familiar territory, although I do support England and not Scotland, so I'll hold my hand up there. I started off in textiles going back 28 years now. Started as a lab technician, testing materials, testing fabrics for parachute fabrics and nylon printing fabrics and things like that, and then worked my way through that business through several different roles. I did a sourcing role out in the Far East and North America, and then moved into an operational role, managing a team of people and a P&L account there. I started at Tarmac in 2005 in building products. I started in a sales and operational planning mode. Stayed there for 2 to 3 years and then moved into a continuous improvement team. So that was all around behavioural change. It was a project called Project Trident. Malcolm might very well know that, who's on the call. And then I moved into logistics for 3 or 4 years. I've always had a sort of a national role, a projects role, a coordination, facilitation role. And that's led me into the role that I've got now in the national commercial team, where, as Harry says, I manage different major projects, predominantly HS2, but I've been involved in new nuclear projects as well. And I'm also involved in the Lower Thames Crossing and leading that project down in Kent that's going to start over the next few years. A little bit about the personal side. Obviously, you see the photograph there. That's an HS2 site down just outside Rickmansworth. Very passionate about the project. It's a fascinating project. I've learned a lot, and I'm still learning a lot about that project every day. I obviously like to socialise, love a drink, love going out with the team, and I'm a little bit mad too, throwing myself off buildings, cliffs, bridges, and swimming with sharks. So that's a little bit about me. Okay, I'm going to play you a little introduction film.
Most of Britain's railway network was built over 100 years ago. The same network is still used today and was never designed to run as many services as it does. It's overcrowded, and we need more space and capacity to improve local, regional and freight journeys. Cars, lorries and planes have a huge impact on climate change. We need a cleaner, greener mode of transport in line with Britain's commitment to become net zero by 2050. We need to connect people and places across the nation to help level up the country, boost local economies and provide more opportunities for millions of people. HS2 will revolutionise the way we travel, addressing these three key problems. When completed, 345 miles of brand new high-speed track will run between Birmingham, Manchester, Leeds and London, joining up the UK's major cities, connecting 30 million people. The new railway will add vital capacity to our overcrowded rail network by placing high-speed trains on their own set of tracks. This will create thousands of extra seats for more commuter services at over 100 stations on the UK's existing network and free up space for more freight by rail. HS2 will take cars and lorries off the road while reducing the need for domestic air travel, leading to a reduction in carbon emissions, improving our air quality. Bringing the nation closer together will boost growth, create new jobs and open up leisure opportunities for millions of people. HS2, more capacity, cutting carbon and better connectivity.
Okay, a lot of people think the reason HS2 is being built is because it'll get you from Birmingham to London 10 minutes quicker. And it's a real misconception. It's about what that video's just said. It's about taking vehicles off the road. It's about freeing up the network for more passenger and commuter rail. So it's a popular misconception that it's just about the speed of it. Okay, so you see on the screen there the whole route. Today's presentation is really going to concentrate on phase one, which is the London to Birmingham section. So you can see, I'll talk through the different sections there. You can see 4 stations as well at Old Oak Common, Euston Interchange and Curzon Street. Phase 2A is your blue section there up to Crewe, and then you've got phase 2B, which is the western leg up to Wigan and Manchester Piccadilly, and the eastern leg up through to Leeds, and they're all at different stages at the moment. At the top there, you've got the original timeline right back to February 2011, and it talks about some of the royal assents and approvals process, looking for phase 1 to open in 2026. So what's the latest? Well, the latest is on phase 1, February 2017, royal assent was granted. The main work started early last year, and the current plan, which is interesting, is expected opening of 2029 to 2033. So that could be, at this point in time, up to a 7-year delay. So you can imagine in 5, 6, 7 years' time, you do wonder what that date is going to be. Phase 2A, royal assent was granted earlier this year. Main works are due to start in 2022. And they've just started sort of letting some of the packages there, which I'll walk through again in a little bit more detail further in the presentation. But again, that's got an expected opening at the same time as phase 1. And then phase 2B, which is those legs up to Wigan, Manchester, through the Eastern Hub, East Midlands Hub up to Leeds, are under consultation at the moment. Now, there's been 3 or 4 rounds of consultation, and there's a lot of speculation in the news of whether phase 2B will happen or not, whether the Leeds leg will happen, whether the Manchester leg will happen. And sat here now, I have no idea if that will go ahead or not. Read what you like through the press at this moment in time. But there's not a lot of activity from a tarmac perspective or from a construction perspective and supply chain perspective on phase 2B at this point in time. Okay, so the stages of construction. So I'm now talking about phase 1, so the London to Birmingham section, and this is really in 3 different phases. So the first phase is the enabling works, and you can see the civils contractors who secured these packages a number of years ago now, from Langmurphy in the north down to Costain and Skanska in the south, And the enabling works, like most enabling works, it's ground investigation, it's site clearance, it's creating the compounds, it's utility and road diversions, these sorts of activities. And a lot of those enabling works are now sort of coming to an end. You'll see if you've been down to sort of Birmingham New Street, if you've been to London Euston Station, a lot of that activity happening at the moment. There's a lot of archaeological activity, a lot of ecological work as part of those enabling works as well. The next phase is the main works, which is the real sort of construction activity. So that's the building of the tunnels, it's the building of the viaducts, the bridges, the cuttings, the real high value stuff where the majority of the construction materials that the likes of Tarmac, Hanson, Cemex, AI, Breeden, etc. will supply onto this scheme. And they're split into seven different sections. So starting out of London, you've got Skanska, Costain, Strabag that are doing the S1 and S2 section. They're predominantly tunnels. So 95% of that route is twin board tunnels coming out of London. You then get into the C1 section. So a line is Volker Fitzpatrick, Bouygues and Sir Robert McAlpine. They're building a 16-kilometre tunnel and a 3.5-kilometre viaduct over the Chilterns. You're then into the Eiffage Kia Ferrovial BAM section. So that was originally Carillion Eiffage Kia. Then it went to Eiffage Kia with the demise of Carillion, and now it's Eiffage Kia Ferrovial BAM. So a lot of rebranding there for section C2 and C3. There's a couple of green tunnels on their section, but more sort of standard construction. And then in N1 and N2 up into Birmingham, you've got the Balfour Beatty Vinci joint venture who are building that section. Again, there's a couple of tunnels there. There's a Bromford tunnel just coming into Birmingham, and there's the Long Itchington Wood tunnel just to the sort of south of their section. So that's the main works packages. Then you've got the track systems packages. So that's the sort of final phase, if you will. And this is the laying of the actual track itself. And it's all the catenary systems and the electrifications and the points on the track that are into track systems packages. The tender for the track systems packages came out to 4 shortlisted JVs in July, I think it was now. And that, just to give you the scale, that tender window doesn't close until April next year. So that's a 9-month tender window for those JVs to secure packages, four packages of around about £500 million each in value. Okay, so you're starting to get a scale of the construction requirements on the project. The next slide is, this has been taken from a few years ago now, but this was the estimated volume of material that was required across the scheme. And there's asphalt to go on this as well. There's a significant amount of asphalt required on the scheme, but just the concrete alone, I think if you look at Tarmac's output on an annual basis, that's a lot more than Tarmac produce in a year, and this is over sort of 5 or 6 years. So there's some huge contracts, some huge value contracts that are in play on this scheme, and opportunities for the supply chain, not just for large businesses like Tarmac, Hanson, AI Breed, and Cemex, etc., but for a lot of independents and a lot of small and medium enterprises as well. I'm going to go through some of those and give you an idea of the types of materials and their applications. So starting off with aggregates, there's a huge requirement for around about 16 million tonnes for Balfour Beatty Vinci and Eiffage Kier for Oviel BAM on for the fill aggregates for their sections. So that's the northerly section C2, C3, N1, N2. A lot of that's been done through GRS Roadstone and a special purpose vehicle that's been set up at Railstone Solutions. So that's a partnership. It's Tarmac, it's AI, and it's GRS, who are the logistics provider, where we're setting up a lot of new assets. So we've got an agreement with Hams Hall down just outside Birmingham. We're expanding our Banbury operation. There's new rolling stock that's been put on the rail network to actually accommodate all the aggregates that's required, because obviously 16 million tonnes over a space of 3 to 4 years is a significant amount of material. And there's also a lot of expansion happening at quarries in Derbyshire and the Midlands to make sure that obviously that material can come out of those units and get to the trace and get to the HS2 routes and the contractors that need that. In terms of ready-mix concrete, I'll show a slide in a couple of moments' time that'll show you where all the different packages are along the route. Again, from our perspective, from a Tarmac perspective, and from AI, Cemex, Hanson, and Capital Concrete in London as well, we're developing a number of on and off-site strategies. So there's a lot of temporary concrete plants going up along the route. Tarmac are putting 12 brand new concrete plants along the trace. That's more concrete plants than we've got in the whole of Scotland, just to give you the scale of that. There's also a lot of technical expertise and knowledge being utilised around what we call the MAR process. That's the materials approvals report. So to get a concrete mix designed and approved through the main works contractors and then through HS2 is quite a lengthy process to make sure you've got signed off the correct raw materials, we're meeting the correct specification, and the concrete is going to be fit for purpose before you can start batching anything on site or bringing anything in from off site. In terms of tunnel segments, I think you saw in the video there's around about 30-40 miles worth of tunnels. So there's a lot of tunnel segment contracts being let. So you see the likes of Packardar in Kent picking up contracts there. You've got self-delivery models. So you've got Strabag on the construction press. I think it was this morning or yesterday in Hartlepool. There's a new facility opening up that's going to create around about 100 jobs up there as well. So it's good that it's coming out of London. It's a little bit like the Heathrow hubs model that was going to happen, where they were looking for a hub in Scotland, a hub in Wales, a hub in Ireland, a hub in England. I don't know if anybody's sort of aware of that, but it's all around making sure the economy is growing outside of London, outside of Birmingham, where possible, but obviously getting that balance of not bringing materials from further afield, because then you're affecting the carbon footprint. In terms of infrastructure and pavement, there's quite a long 80 to 90 kilometre temporary haul road that's being built along EKFB section. Tarmac are in partnership with Roadbridge, a joint venture there to build that. That's a roller compacted concrete. There's a lot of asphalt opportunities on the BBV section, anywhere around about sort of 300,000 tonnes of material there that's required. So I'm just trying to sort of convey the scale. This isn't what Tarmac have secured. This is everything that's out to the market, and a combination of different sort of, different material suppliers are securing these packages at the moment. Moving on to grout, there's a couple of areas there. So when the ground investigation works have been carried out, there's a lot of fissures that they've been finding. They need compaction grout injecting into those to stabilize that ground. It's better than digging it out and then filling it in and compacting it. So there's opportunities there, and there's been opportunities on the Align section, certainly in 2020. And then obviously with all the tunnels, there's the annulus grout that goes around the tunnel edge between the earth and the actual tunnel segments itself to create that seal. Again, that's a powdered blend of cementitious material with added water that creates that. So again, huge opportunity for the construction industry and those companies that produce those types of products. And then the bottom one you've got on there is lime. So only a few producers of lime in the UK use a hydrated lime for use at the tunnel boring machine head. You use lime to treat the spoil that's coming out of the tunnels. So a lot of the material that's coming out of the tunnels is being placed locally. It's being used for landscaping. So you've got to treat that with lime to get the right MCV, the right CBRs. And some of the tunnel spoil can't be placed locally because it's coming out of London. So that tunnel spoil is being moved along the Thames, similarly to what happened with Crossrail for sort of RSPB sanctuaries, redevelopment, quarry void filling and things like that. So a lot of materials, a lot of different end uses. If you look at the concrete, so that's the route again coming out of London up to Birmingham, and you just see the variety of different suppliers that are supplying concrete onto the scheme. So you've got Aggregate Industries up in Balfour Beatty Vinci's section there, and Cemex, and then you come down, you've got an Eiffage self-delivery model in part of the EKFB section, and then you've got into London there a combination of Hanson, Capital, and Tarmac on the sort of east that section. But that gives you a scale of the concrete for the sort of the main works section. So that's the building of the viaducts, the tunnels, some of the tunnel segment concrete, and you're looking at in excess of sort of 4 million cubic meters of concrete there over a sort of a 5 to 6 year spell. So remember, we're only talking about the main works of phase 1 here. We've not got into phase 2A or phase 2B. The video I'm going to show you now is at Align's main compound. So for those of you that have been on the M25 recently between junction 16 and 17, you'll see to the side around about a 1.5 to 2 kilometre long compound, and it's where the tunnel boring machines launched 3 to 4 months ago. They're now a mile through. They've bored under the M25, they're boring through the Chilterns, and that's the 16 kilometre long twin bore tunnels that Align are constructing. On that compound, they've got 3 precast factories, 2 segment precast factories. They've got a viaduct beam precast factory. They've got a slurry treatment plant, and they've got 3 concrete plants. And this is a video showing a time lapse of those concrete plants being installed in 2020. Line South Portal compound is probably the biggest compound on HS2 at the moment. If you've got any connections to any of the companies working down there, whether it's Tarmac, whether it's Weeks, Robert McAlpine, Vulcan Fitzpatrick, you get the opportunity to visit that compound, I'd encourage you to get down there because it's an impressive facility. I'm not talking about the batching plants, the whole compound and where the tunnel boring machines have launched. It's impressive, and to say it's all temporary is quite scary as well. It's all going to come down afterwards. I think one of the key challenges in putting those batching plants up was the interaction with all the different types of contractors that were on site, because there was so much building activity happening at that time and crossover between contractors. It was quite challenging to manage, and all that was happening in the middle of the COVID pandemic as well. So it added complexity on the build program. Okay, I wanted to touch on HS2's approach to procurement and some of the contractor management. There's a real supply chain focus, and there's a lot around small and medium enterprises, a lot about early engagement. So, you know, we were engaged on this project right back for 2014, 15, and it was years before we secured any work. And, you know, similarly across our competitors and sort of colleagues across the industry, a lot of the opportunities come through the Compete For portal, and that's been publicised quite widely, and that's all around fairness and, you know, making sure procurement teams within HS2 or within the civil contractor businesses aren't just selecting their sort of favourite suppliers, if you will, or the traditional supply chain. It's all around fairness, and a lot of activity happens through that portal. The tender process for some of the packages has been extremely intense. So what the likes of Balfour Beatty Vinci, who are letting a package for a couple of million cube of concrete split across 3 packages, you can imagine the intensity of the procurement process there. They had several budgeting exercises to go through, so requests for prices were quite a big thing. Then they came out for the pre-qualification questionnaires to shortlist the supply chain, and then you were into the invitation to tender. And traditionally what you'll see on tenders, it's all about the price. So, you know, we've got a commodity product, you could argue, and it's all about the price, but not so with HS2, to the extreme that some of the packages that came out to the market were 80% quality, 20% price. So when I say quality, that's all around how you are going to deliver the goods, the surety of supply, what your sustainability strategy is like, what your technical processes are you have in place, how many apprentices you're going to commit to the scheme. So it's all about the delivery of the scheme, not how much it costs, whereas the commercial aspect is around the price. It's around the contractual conditions that you sign up to. So huge difference that we've seen on HS2, more about the quality, much more of a percentage on the quality, less of a percentage on the price. More often than not, the packages, the submissions were followed by quite intensive interviews, in some cases, sort of behavioural assessments, meeting some of the team that are going to deliver these packages over the next 5 to 6 years, further shortlisting, and then best and final offers. So these procurement programmes for the likes of Tarmac, you could argue just to sell a few cubic metres of concrete were months long. So not like you get a phone call this afternoon and get asked to price a job in 48 hours time. They were huge, intensive processes. In terms of a little bit around Tarmac's procurement, we used Compete For as well. So we were encouraged to use Compete For, and again, not just pick our sort of favourite traditional, if you will, approved suppliers. So for the batching plants, I mentioned that we've got 12 batching plants We put that out on Compete For. We had 13 different suppliers come to an open day. We went through a process of thinning those suppliers down for the different packages that we were selected for. And even to the degree it mentions there that a line where we've won Alliance Concrete, Align were part of the team that decided which batching plants were used on that section C1. So they carried out the due diligence. They spent time in Turkey working with Mika and Berkshire Engineering Supplies, carrying out the due diligence for those batching plants. So it was a real collaborative effort. The last point on there is around collaboration. So SCS is a great example. If you remember the map, you had 3 sections on SCS in London. You had Tarmac, you had Capital Concrete, and you had Hanson. And they're the 3 packages. And what we're doing now is we're backing each other up. So for example, Tarmac will supply the east section out of King's Cross. On larger pours, Hanson will support that, and it's real collaboration, it's real working together, and vice versa. Hanson have won the west package over at Ruislip, and Tarmac are supporting on those larger pours, or when Hanson are busy with their sort of business as usual. So it's a really good example of collaboration across the supply chain and not working independently. Touching on some of the key risks and challenges for the project, obviously, you couldn't get away from this without talking about COVID. I mentioned the plant installations. So we had a lot of foreign workforce. So getting people in and out of the country with the restrictions and lockdown was a challenge, and also infections. So the site at Align at the South Portal didn't really stop at all. It was never sort of shut down for a period of any time. It continued, but there was quite an impact on people being affected by COVID, not being able to work, having to isolate, had an effect on the programme. And also remote working as well. We got very used to working in and out of each other's offices. So I used to hot desk in Skanska's office. I used to hot desk in Bouygues' offices and just work closely as a supply chain partner, and that became remote. So that was a challenge at the time, but it's something that we're now all used to. And the fact that we're having this call rather than having it face to face is sort of testament to that. From a resource perspective, materials, so you'll see that HS2 is having a huge pull on the industry. Certainly, some of our units are maxed out at the moment, whether it's stone in the ground or volume you can actually put through the plant. So there's a real challenge around making sure we balance business as usual with HS2, because the last thing we want to do is, after the project's finished, there's no sort of legacy business as usual to go back to, because we've affected that. So we look at it in terms of its incremental volume, its added volume to the business that we've got at the moment. Haulage is really biting at the moment. We know there's a backlog of something like 90,000 tests that haven't been completed. Brexit's had an impact on that as well. So we've had to look at different strategy. We're working with third-party suppliers there. We've also got our contract haulier fleet, and I'm not just talking for Tarmac here. I'm probably talking for all of the industry when they hear about haulage and staff. You've got a screenshot there on the right-hand side. That's actually the delivery team for Alfa BT Vinci and Eiffage Kia for OVO BAM, and that's just for the concrete, and there's 46 people. So that's 46 new roles that have been created at Tarmac just to manage two contracts, 2 large contracts, but 2 contracts. So technical expertise has been a struggle, and that continues to be a challenge. But again, we've set our business up differently to accommodate that and mitigate the risks there. I've put hyperinflation and input costs. We're also hearing about carbon at the moment and how we manage that. If you're looking at long-term contracts, you've got to make sure that you're de-risked on those long-term contracts, and you're not signing up to things that in 5 years' time your input costs have escalated and you can't pass that on to the customer. So there's a lot of conversations through the contractors up through to HS2 of making sure that the supply chain's secured, if you will, and there's a sustainable supply chain in place that can actually deliver this project successfully. Couple at the bottom there around program slippage and volume reduction. So again, we're not talking about sort of projects that are going to last for a few weeks. We're talking about contracts that are going to last 5 or 6 months. And if you're putting new infrastructure in place for that, you need to make sure that the volume is going to come through at the anticipated program. So again, discussions, engagement with the contractors to make sure any sort of costs incurred are covered through different mechanisms, and you've got that sustainable supply chain in place. Look at EDI, SEE, a huge part of the bidding process, a huge part of our everyday lives at the moment. Equality, diversity, inclusion. We've been on that journey now for a couple of years. If you'd have mentioned that phrase probably 5 years ago, it would have been alien to most people. We've got a different way of recruiting people through our resourcing hub at the moment. We're asked to support on our spend within the supply chain and the types of companies that we're using. And we're also asked to report on what training is given on I&D throughout our business and also to our supply chain as well. From an SEE perspective, some of the contracts have a minimum 5% apprentices or graduates program that you've got to sign up to. And we're lucky enough to have a program within our business, but we're also making sure that we're putting apprentices into operational roles, commercial roles, technical roles, maintenance roles as well across the packages that are being secured. And that'll be the same across, again, the likes of Cemex, Hanson, Capital, Breeden, AI, etc. Look at the legacy benefits. So I've talked earlier about the asset development. So yes, some of the ready-mix plants will come down that are on the scheme, but the asset development at the railheads of the quarries and the receiving rail depots and some of the off-site concrete plants that'll stay in place give you that real asset legacy benefit, not just for Tarmac, but for the local communities and employment as well. You've got the skills and the people development side, where you'll have people at the end of this project that have started off as a technician or a graduate, and they'll be in management roles. I can see it happening already with people getting promoted through the business, which is fantastic to see. All the experience and lessons learned. I think I started off the presentation by saying I'm learning every day, and that is absolutely the case on this project for a number of years now and a number of years to come. And I'll take that into future projects and become better for it. And the relationships that are created as well throughout the supply chain. There's a lot of legacy value in HS2 with it being such a significant project, first of its kind in the UK. I'm going to finish off on the future phases. So I mentioned at the start, so I've concentrated on phase 1 mostly there, which is the real stuff that's happening at the moment. If you look at phase 2A is going from Birmingham to Crewe. 3 stages for that: the early civils, the advanced civils, and the main civils. Contracts are starting to be awarded there. I think I said earlier in the presentation, work's going to start in early 2022. There's a number of tenders out for the advanced works and early engagement on the main works. So again, that will happen. That will start next year, and there'll be supplies onto that definitely in 2022. Phase 2B under consultation. Who knows? The western leg, the eastern leg, do they both go? Do one of them go? Do neither of them go? Sat here now, I couldn't tell you, but that's a bit of an idea of the future phases of HS2. So hopefully that's given you an introduction to HS2, a little bit about the construction activity on HS2 and the future phases of HS2, and you've enjoyed the presentation. Thank you very much.
Damon, one for you. Is there any material being imported from offshore, apart from obviously cement because of the shortages, but is there any plans to bring aggregates in?
There's, I can't speak for Tarmac's competitor. I can speak for Tarmac on this one. So yeah, we bring cement in from Ireland, and we bring GGBS in from Europe as well. So you can class that, but if you're talking about aggregates, there's no aggregates coming in. Lime could be an option coming in from our parent company CRH, Malcolm. So yeah, that could be an option. But you're talking about products where there's a shortage across the industry in the UK. It's really a last resort. We want to keep it as local as possible, because the sort of the tendency is imports, extra carbon, extra cost, not beneficial to the project as a whole. But if we want to build it, we might need to do that as an industry.
Thank you. Just one other while I've got the floor. You mentioned freight. Obviously, they can increase the freight on the existing lines by opening HS2, but will HS2 carry any freight?
No, it's purely passenger. As it stands, whether that changes, because the design life of it is 120 years. So who knows in the future, but it's going to be purely passenger traffic.
Okay, thank you.
And apparently the tickets have to be the same price as they currently are on the West Coast main line as well. So
Expensive then.
What opportunities, if any, are there from suppliers in Scotland to supply the country?
Are there any opportunities for suppliers in Scotland to supply? I would imagine so. I would encourage you to look at the Compete For portal, and there's quite often supply chain events. There's a supply chain event, an HS2 supply chain event being held for the main works contractors in the middle of November, and the stations contractors, I think, at the start of December. Louise, if you can take a note of this, I've got a link to a couple of supply chain events that I can circulate across the attendees. So I'm sure there will be. I don't know what industry you're in, Alan. Apologies. Or what sort of supply chain you are, but I'm sure there will be.
Okay, thank you.
I've got a quick question. You mentioned about sorry, it's Lisa Thompson here. You mentioned about the kind of misconceptions about the public misconception about the kind of carbon footprint and things on the kind of social aspects of the project. Is protesting and things like that something that you're, like, as a project concerned with or been an issue with in terms of the kind of misconceptions about HS2?
Yes, there's a lot of campaign groups, Extinction Rebellion, Stop HS2. There's several, and there is a lot of protest activity causing a lot of disruption. So I think we've seen over the last few weeks in London on the M25, the blockades causing traffic issues. There's been quite a lot at the compounds. There was one at the main compound where the batching plants were going up about 3 to 4 months ago, I think, where people chained themselves to a lot of the machinery, and the compound was down for 24 hours. So it is causing complexities and challenges. I think the only thing we can do as an industry is educate the public about the benefits, and be very mindful that whilst construction activity is happening, it's inevitably going to cause a negative impact on a lot of communities. That's probably why, Lisa, that a lot of the tender is around the quality aspect. So, what you're contributing to the community, what charity work you're doing, how many volunteering hours are you willing to commit to a year? What are you putting back to the community from that perspective? Because you're taking away by constructing a huge railway line through some areas of outstanding beauty.
That's great, thank you.
Damon, I'd like to thank you for your presentation today. It's been enlightening as to the sort of timescales, volumes of materials, and costs, etc. So on behalf of the Scottish branch, I'd like to thank you.
You're welcome.